Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hey, welcome back to the Stepmom Side podcast. I'm your host, Alicia, and maybe you saw this podcast title and you thought, what in the world is she going to be talking about? Let me ask you this. Does it ever feel like in your house it's a free-for-all and you're the only one trying to hold it together? Because guess what? It's not your stepkids that are the problem, it's your partner. Yep, I said it. We're just gonna get right into it. And here's the thing, like I've talked a lot about this inside the stepmom side community and on coaching calls with stepmoms, but I've never like publicly talked about it, I guess. Like I don't talk about it on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, like in my stories. But here's the deal. When I showed up, if you're familiar with my story, you already know this. My stepkids were 8 and 11. And obviously at 8 and 11, they're probably more than capable of like doing all the things like clearing the dish from the table or helping out with dishes or cleaning up their things, picking up after themselves, just like common courtesy things. Hanging their wet towel up on the bathroom hook is a massive complaint that I hear from stepmoms like during coaching. I'm like, I hear, why can't they just pick up the wet towel? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about because I've had the exact same problem at my house. So here's the thing. I was really frustrated with my stepkids. Like, why can't they do this? And why can't they do that? And why can't they do this? And, because I showed up without any kids from a prior relationship, people would say, well, it's just different. Like when you have your own kids, like you'll just do all of those things for them. For the record, I don't do all of those things for my daughter. Like she knows, okay, after dinner, you're responsible for taking your plate and your cup and your silverware to the table. When you get out of the shower, you're responsible for hanging up your towel. If she could actually reach the towel hook, if she can't, so I actually do that. But cleaning up her toys, I will help her, or I can give direction because if I say clean your room, her level of clean is vastly different than my level of clean, and I talked about this before. But I was with my stepkids, I was like, I don't understand. Here's like just the complete disconnect between my husband and I and like when the kids were here versus like when they weren't. Because when they were here, um, everything was it seemed to me like chaos. It seemed like, we would go from having like a super great relationship if it was just him and like he was super doting and super loving and all of the things. And then when the kids were here, he was like stressed out and like trying to do all of the things and running around with this chicken, like a chicken with its head cut off. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, why is this happening? What's going on? Like, I'm so frustrated because what I would like to do is spend time with him, but I can't because he's so busy doing all of these things with them. You already know. Like, I don't even know why I'm explaining this to you because you already know. And so I said to him, if I'm an adult in this house, in this situation, and I'm confused, imagine how the kids feel. Like, obviously, they've got to be very confused on like what they do or don't have to do because sometimes they'd get in trouble for things, sometimes they wouldn't. And a lot of times they would get into trouble for things like when I was there or when I was here, or like when I was around because I was the bad guy and I was the enforcer. And so when it was just the three of them, my husband was just like most people, falls back into old habits because it's easier, right? It's easier than nagging them. And, countless times I would hear, well, they're only here for so much time, or they're only here for, dinner or whatever it is. And it's like, I get that, but consistency and follow through are what we need. And so I just want to say, like, I acknowledge the frustration and the exhaustion of trying to enforce the rules when your partner isn't backing you up. Like, this was something that caused many, many, many fights, many arguments. Does that sound better than fights? Um, but we had discussed it in marriage counseling because if you know my story, like the very first year of our marriage, I was Googling like how to get divorced daily because it was really, really freaking hard. And then here I am all these years later, like coaching stepmoms how to go from like that to where I was, which is like, I'm just gonna set this thing on fire and like watch it burn to like now where I'm like, there is a better way. Let me show you the way. Um, but our marriage counselor had said, why don't you guys set up house expectations? And I was like, what is she talking about? And so let me just like preface this for you. Like, let me just give you some backstory, like for me and like how it went down so you don't make the same mistakes. Because when I talk about it in coaching with stepmoms, I see them do the exact same thing. And I'm like, hey, let me stop you because I did the exact same thing and it's not going to work. So our marriage counselor was like, okay, I hear your frustrations. I hear what you're saying. Maybe house expectations would be a good thing for you guys. And in my head, I've now stopped listening to her. And I'm like, okay, what I can do is set expectations about 300 different things. And so she's like, Alicia, I see that you are like off in your own world, creating a list of 300 things. And I'm like, holy shit, how did she know? That's exactly what I was doing. And she was like, no, 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 we're not doing that. What we're going to do is make a smaller list. Less is more for a multitude of reasons. Number one, if you have a list of 300 things, who's going to enforce them? You? And I was like, well, duh. And she goes, just so you know, if you have a list of 300 things, it's going to be really hard for you to enforce that. And it's also going to be really exhausting. So less is more. And also, it's easier if you've got overarching ideas and a bunch of things can fit underneath those ideas. And I was like, okay, that's fair. So we came up with seven. And if you're like, okay, what are the seven? If you go to aliciacrasco.com/expectations, you will get our seven that we had, like our house expectations that we had. I've got a free resource for you. It is called, just so I get the name right, because it is a little bit longer, Set Your Step Family Up for Success, How to Create House Expectations That Work for Everyone. Because here's the deal. You want this to work for everyone, not just the kids. Like you guys, everyone has to like fall into place. So we had seven of them. I memorized them. I do not recommend that. Okay, if you do memorize them, fine, but don't do it like I did, where I was like, okay, no, I'd say to my stepson or my stepdaughter, house expectation number one says, and it totally came off completely bitchy. Definitely don't recommend that. And then it got to the point with my stepson where I could just like jokingly say it to him. I'd be like really sarcastic. I'd be like, well, I don't know, but house expectation number four says X, Y, and Z. And so then we could laugh about it. But it is really frustrating and it's exhausting to try to keep enforcing all of these things if your partner isn't on the same team with you. So in this free resource, you will get a step-by-step process on like how to just like go through it and do it. And I put R7 in there and grace. That's what I'm going to tell you. Grace, some time and some grace, because even though, let's say you do a house expectations and you're like, yes, I'm in, um, it's going to take time because everyone's going to make mistakes, you included. People are going to forget. We're not going to flip out, or we're going to try not to flip out about it. Grace, grace. That's what I'm going to say. Grace. So here's the purpose of the podcast episode. I want you to be able to identify that your frustrations often stem from the lack of a united house expectations and not necessarily like bad stepkids, which is the easy thing to do, right? Kind of like it's easy for your stepkids to like blame you as like the stepmom. It's really easy for you to blame them as like your stepkids. But like a lot of times it just comes down to a disconnect between you and your partner, which like super sucks to hear. You're like, no, it's not my partner's fault. It's the kids' fault because they're not doing these things. Well, let's dig a little deeper. Why aren't the kids doing that? Is it because your partner lets them do whatever they want? You know that old adage of like, people treat you how you allow them to treat you? It's kind of the same thing here too. But I'm going to offer you actionable steps to work with your partner to create a cohesive family dynamic. So just like stay with me because there might be a lot of information in here for you. So the real problem, it's not the kids. I know the massive misconception is, like I kind of alluded to already, is stepmoms often misdirect their frustration towards the kids. Your stepkids testing boundaries is completely normal, but it does absolutely become unbearable when you and your partner aren't on the same page. And a lot of times, I would venture to say like 90% of the times, it comes down to like the stepmom wanting to enforce things or the stepmom being like, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that or you need to tell the kids to do this or the kids need to do that. You're the bad guy for enforcing the rules that no one else seemingly cares about even though like you and your partner might be like, okay, yeah, they definitely need to clean the table, pick up their bedroom, make sure their shoes are put away, whatever it is. Even though you guys are in agreement on that, it's easy. A lot of times your partner is caught in the middle. Dad Guilt, episode number 66, that's something I definitely recommend that you listen to. But a lot of times, and I'll link that in the show notes too, a lot of times our partners are caught in the middle because they're trying to pacify everyone. They want to keep you happy. They want to keep the kids happy. They want to keep the ex happy, so that there's so many things going on. And so a lot of times they will just say, yeah, I agree with you on whatever it is when it comes to like house expectations or chores or tasks, whatever it is that you want to call it. And then when push comes to shove, it's so much easier just to do the task because you've got kids in your house. Obviously, how many times are you telling them over and over and over and over and over to do the exact same thing, right? Like you're trying to get out the door, put your shoes on, put your shoes on, put your shoes on, put your coat on, put your coat. Like we go through this every time. Like, why do I have to tell you every single time to put your shoes on, put your coat on? Because you know that we're leaving. Why do I have to tell you every single day we have to brush your teeth? We've got to floss. Okay, just all of the things. You already know. So the frustration is misdirected towards the kids because, again, they're going to test boundaries. There needs to be structure, routine, consistency, and follow through, my friend, are your friends here. And you'll end up typically being the bad guy because you're the one that enforces the rules. So that's number one. Like, break down the misconception of it's usually the frustration is misdirected towards your stepkids. Number two, let's call out the source of the issue. It's not about your stepkids being out of control or unreasonable or ridiculous or at whatever word you've got made up for them. It's not about your stepkids being out of control. It's about your partner not stepping up. And common reasons partners avoid discipline, dad guilt, like I talked about in episode number 66. Please go back and listen to that. There's all of the things. Um, Also falls under that category is fear of the ex withholding the kids. If the kids go back and are constantly like, oh, dad only yells at us about this, that, and the other, or, my stepmom, Alicia, she's evil and she this, that, and the other. It's it's a reason to like not do it because it's so much easier. There's less conflict, there's less friction if I just do it. And then there's also like, if you want it done right, you just do it yourself. But also there's something that's not really talked about is a lack of parenting confidence. So let's say that in your partner's previous relationship, the other parent, like their mom, typically took over the parenting. So your partner's just kind of like along for the ride and doesn't really know what to do and has never had to do that. That was definitely my situation. And so I just want you to know like it's crazy because a lot of the stepmoms I coach have come into like the relationship as a stepmom with no kids of their own. They're like, I don't understand. How am I, someone that doesn't have kids, a better parent than my partner who has kids and has had them for a long time? And why am I telling them what to do? Girlfriend, I see you. You are not alone and you're not unreasonable for wanting the structure and respect in your own home. That is completely normal. However, sometimes your partner lacks the confidence to parent because they've never had to do it. Kind of like you lack the confidence sometimes of like being a stepmom, like, am I doing it right? Am I doing too much? Am I not doing enough? All of the things. It's just getting that confidence and like working on building it up. So let's set expectations together. So the importance of a united front. Kids, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face, and then I will still tell you, kids thrive on consistency and structure, routines that is so good for them. That's why like if they go to a school, if you homeschool, consistency, structure, routines, all very good. But if they go to school, they know, okay, the bell rings at this time. The very first thing we do is this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this. Consistency and structure. That's why I said to you earlier, consistency and follow through are going to be the theme of this, like woven in throughout this whole entire podcast episode. Nothing is going to work if you're going to just half-ass it and do house expectations like some of the time. It has to be in the beginning. I will say I'm not 100% at it now, but in the beginning, I was willing to die on that hill of being like 100% perfect at consistency and follow through. And then I was just like, damn, this is exhausting too. But consistency, structure, follow through. If you set up house expectations and there are consequences for them, and then you don't follow through on the consequences, then they know like it doesn't matter if they don't do whatever it is. So then you're right back at square one because nothing's going to happen if they don't do them. So the lack of alignment between you and your partner causes chaos and it undermines authority. So if you are the one that's like pushing for, we need to do this and we need to do that, and it doesn't matter to your partner, they're not going to enforce it. They're not going to do any of those things. So here's how we're going to do this. You have to have the talk, so to speak, with your partner. And timing matters because you don't want to address discipline issues in the heat of the moment. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. They're already annoyed that their kid did whatever, or maybe they're not annoyed and they're annoyed at you that you're pissed off that their kid did whatever. And now you're pissed. And so you both of you are gonna your heads are gonna be on fire like anger from inside out in a matter of seconds. And that fire is not going to go out anytime soon. You know, there could be egos involved, there could, whatever it is, and it's never a good idea to fight in front of the kids, right? And that's exactly what it'll turn into, a massive fight, a massive blowout. And great, there's more ammo for the other house, right? So schedule a calm, distraction-free time to talk. And you've probably heard me say this before, but early on, my husband and I, would have Friday check-ins on our couch. Sometimes I would show up with a coffee, sometimes it would be water, and sometimes it would be a drink. Yes, and I'll call it drink at 11 a.m., depending on how I thought this conversation was going to go, because I had a list and I was ready. And then, like, I'd been making it for the week, like from the prior Friday. And then it got to the point where that Friday would come around and I would just go through and like cross things off the list because they didn't seem that important anymore. But you want a time where it's carved out and you already know that we're going to be having this conversation. I will give you a little bit of advice. Please set a timer for this time. It's not just going to be however long it is. And I actually got that from my husband because I would beat a dead horse just to get my way, like 100%, absolutely. I don't do that anymore, but I absolutely did in the beginning. And he'd be like, okay, we're past the point of return here. We aren't getting anywhere. You are still mad. I am no longer listening to you. This isn't going anywhere. We need to set a timer on this. We are only going to discuss this topic for X amount of time and start with a big number, and then you can kind of narrow it down. You get very good at like clear, concise communication. And now we can have conversations and it's not like a massive blowout, or I don't feel like I need to beat a dead horse. Like I understand that like he's actually getting it, but I totally get in the beginning if you're like, "Rah, I'm not getting anywhere." We also talk about this inside the stepmom side community. So if you are having conversations with your partner and you don't feel like you're heard, come in, post in the community about it, and other stepmoms can chime in and be like, okay, here's how I tried it. Here's another way to word it. So speaking of wording it, let's talk about language to use. Instead of blaming, you never discipline the kids. You never this, you never that. They always this, they always that. Try this. I feel like we're not on the same page about house expectations and it's causing some tension. You can say house rules if you have that. We actually do house expectations because house rule sounds very, I don't know, formal to me or like a prison. I don't know. But like house expectations is what I preferred because it was like everyone follows them. And I'm kind of a rule breaker. Like I love to follow the rules, but until I don't. And then I'm like, "Pfft, those are just guidelines, baby. Like I'm about to do whatever it is that I want." So try to use I feel this. Like I had said to you, I said, I feel confused as the adult in the situation. I can only imagine how the kids feel. So I feel statements work really, really, really well. And if you're like, I don't know what kind of I feel statements to use, practice them. And then also, here's your pro tip, go practice them in front of a mirror. Make sure that whatever face you're making is also matching the voice that's coming out of your mouth because they don't always match up. And again, if you've been in coaching with me, you've definitely heard me say this. But also, sometimes there are examples to clarify expectations, like bedtimes, screen time limits, cleaning up after themselves, respect for adults. So, what does that look like? What does respect look like to you? Respect looks like to you something, a one way. It looks different to me. It looks different to your partner. It looks different to your kids. What does cleaning up after themselves look like? That, like I said earlier, my daughter, like if I have her clean her room, it looks very different than what I think. So if you are like, toys need to be picked up, clothes hung up, whatever it is, those need to be like marked out. And if you've got like an overachiever that like loves to check the boxes, hey, that is me. I'm 100% in. Like, let me check those boxes. So you can just spell them out. Like, what does it look like? Bedtimes, okay, you can be very specific on bedtimes. If lights out are 10 o'clock, things to do leading up. Okay, so brush teeth by this time, pajamas on by this, whatever it is for you guys. Same thing with screen time limits. If they're over your screen time limits, because I know that's a massive fight too, we actually have so hilarious. Actually, not hilarious, but you'll understand. So we had house expectations first, and then we had to implement technology expectations because of screen time stuff or like just online stuff, not necessarily like screen time limits, but like we had technology issues. And so we had technology expectations, and it was so much easier to implement technology expectations because we already had house expectations. So let's talk about defining house expectations. Outline how the family will operate, the basic expectations that everyone's going to follow. And it's not just the kids are going to follow them. No, everyone is going to follow them. So don't put an expectation in there that you don't plan on following yourself because that's not fair. You're setting it up for okay, well, we don't have to do them because we are whatever. No, everyone is going to follow them. And here's the thing. You also have to have consequences for breaking those expectations because, like I said earlier, if there aren't going to be consequences, the kids are going to understand like it doesn't matter if we do whatever it is or not. If we say that we're going to do this and we don't, who cares? If we say that we're going to do that and we do, or we say we're not going to do that and we do, like there's no repercussion for it. So have basic expectations, but also have consequences for breaking them and emphasize the importance of consistency because, like I said, kids need to know that the expectations apply no matter whose house they're at. You can't get this enforced at the other house unless you guys are like on a good team there. Um, we had house expectations. The other house did not have house expectations. But if you're like at somebody else's house, like let's say you're at a grandparent's house or a friend's house or whatever, you can those house expectations, hopefully, if done well, will like follow with that. So you also need your partner buy-in. So share ways to involve your partner in setting these expectations so that they feel like it's a joint decision. And in this resource that I was telling you about, there is going to be information on there that you can see. So again, if you head to aliciacrosco.com/expectations, you'll get the free resource, Set Your Step Family Up for Success, how to create house expectations that work for everyone. And it's a little more guided in there, but you want it to be buy-in from your partner. So I in the resource, there's a part where you can go in and like list out all of the things that are important to you. And then you can, say to your partner like, "Hey, you know what? I got this free resource. This is what I'm working on. Here are the things that are important to me. Can you make a list of things that are important to you?" I actually recommend having them make their own list and then you guys can compare notes like where you're in alignment and like where you're not and discuss their fears or their hesitations and address them without judgment. So if they're like, well, we've never had house expectations. I'm scared that the kids aren't going to like them. Instead of being all in your feelings about like, man, like I would have because we have never had house expectations. Well, yeah, obviously you guys didn't in the past, dummy. I can tell because no one does what they're supposed to do. That is not going to get you anywhere. It makes me laugh to like think it, so I might say it in my head, but like I'm going to try really hard to not let that face come out. But you can empathize with them and be like, I understand why you think that this might not go over very well or this might not work very well, but let's just try it and see what happens. Let's do a trial run of like 2 months, depending on whatever your schedule is, and go from there. And like we can always like reassess. So have a family meeting. So you and your partner like have a meeting first, and then you're going to meet with the kids as well and get their buy-in. So you two already have loosely planned out like what you're going to do, like what the house expectations are, but then you're going to ask your stepkids at your family meeting, which I thought I was going to puke at, sweating profusely, super freaking nervous, thought hell was going to freeze over. I didn't know what was going to happen. I made it through. I didn't puke. But ask them like, "Hey, what do you think expectations should be? What do you think consequences would be?" I will tell you this, they will probably give you um, more expectations and their punishment or not punishment, but their consequences will probably be a lot more strict than yours are. So just be mindful. Here's how we handled that. Like we already had a list or ideas of like consequences. And then when we asked them about theirs, we kind of guided the conversation. And so when their consequences were more strict, we just kind of like went halfway between ours and theirs. So just an idea to do. And then here's how to put it all into action. So, like, once you've had your family meeting, once you guys have kind of hammered everything out, it doesn't need to be anything crazy. Like, try to keep it light, even though, like I said, I thought I was going to puke. But once you guys kind of come up with everything, I recommend like typing it out. You guys can design a little thing to do, ask the kids if they want to participate, and then hang it up. Like, put it on a refrigerator, put it in their bedrooms, put it wherever it is that you want to put it. Don't plaster the walls with it, although I thought that would be a really good idea. No one else did. And then putting it into action. So the rollout strategy is you're going to introduce the expectations gradually, especially if the kids aren't used to structure. So it's kind of like I say to you in a coaching call, like, don't try to do everything all at once because what's going to happen, you're going to burn out and then you're just going to be like, the hell with this, I'm not doing anything. Um, that's not going to work. So start one at a time, especially if there hasn't been any structure. And once you get like you could start with one expectation. Once they've gotten really good at that, like you can add in other ones, but stand firm together. So both of you need to enforce the rules consistently. If the kids sense that one of you isn't serious about it, the structure, like I mentioned, is absolutely going to crumble. So back each other up in front of the kids, even if you disagree, discuss it privately later. And if you're multitasking, please come back to me. If for whatever reason you guys disagree on an expectation or whatever's happening, back each other up in front of the kids, again, that united front, but discuss it privately later. And maybe this is, and a lot of times, stepmoms I coach will say, okay, well, my partner agreed to that, but then when push came to shove, like in front of the kids, they said this or they did that. Okay, this is a conversation that you might have to go back and keep having with your partner until like it clicks. But hey, we agreed to these things. Remember, like I'm confused as the adult, I'm struggling as the adult. I can only imagine for the kids how hard it is. So we're doing this namely for the kids. And then we can adjust it over time. So your expectations will absolutely evolve as the kids grow or the dynamics change. So regular check-ins are kind of key, like, hey, how is it going? What do you like? What do you not like? What's happening? And things that might change your house expectations. Maybe you are a full-time stepmom and now you're a part-time or vice versa, or maybe you had your stepkids and then now you only see them like on breaks or whatever. You still need expectations, but you're going to allow again for that adjustment period for them to come back. Kind of like transitioning, same thing. And here's how to handle pushback. You want some tips for staying calm when the kids or your partner resist? When your kids flip out, you can empathy goes so freaking far, and grace goes so freaking far. Like, you know what? I understand that you're struggling. Or like let's say it's day one on transition. Like I understand why you're having a hard time. Like I would have a hard time too if I, came here and had all these new rules. What you're not going to say is, yeah, I would have a hard time too if at the other house I didn't have anything to do and everything, it was just chaos. And, your other partner is so much more concerned about being your friend and blah, 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 all of the things that you want to say. We're not going to say that. If you're in the stepmom side community, you can post that, but we're not going to say that to the kids. You can just, I understand. I get that it's hard. We agreed on this. It's for the benefit of you guys or for the benefit of you. So that way, you understand where you fit in here. We want you to feel welcome. We want you to feel loved. We want you to feel like you belong. And so everyone has their part on this team. So we had like Team Crasco. So you could have like team, insert your last name. So these are the expectations on team, your name. So partner, same thing. If they are resisting, remind them like we came up with these expectations for insert your reason. I've got a million reasons why we did it, but like insert your own reason. And then let's talk about like how to deal with resentment if your partner isn't following through. That again, it feels like you're back at square one and you're like, what the hell? Like we spent all of this time discussing and going over and trying to like get on the same team and like, just do all of the things together, only to have you completely like disregard everything. Like what in the world is going on? So resentment, frustration, annoyance, being pissed off, like all of the anger, sometimes those things are going to come flooding back and just breathe because, like I said, there is going to be an adjustment period. It's not going to be like a flip of a switch and now everything is perfectly fine and it's all great. No, what you see at my house has been years in the making. So give yourself grace. to navigate this. Give your stepkids grace to navigate this. Give your partner grace to navigate this. It's going to take a while for things to sink in. That's why I'm like, start with one. Once everyone's got that under control, like we can add the other ones in. Like, okay, now we're going to add this one. Now we're going to add this one. So it's going to be a slow rollout process. Now you can do them all at once if you want, but then but a slow rollout process and give everyone the grace just to like navigate it. And so let's talk about encouragement. But here's the thing, before we get to encouragement, like here's a massive takeaway that I want you to understand about this podcast episode and like having house expectations and all of the things. The problem isn't the kids. I know you can sit here and tell me like, oh, my stepkids are disrespectful. Oh, my stepkids do this or they do that or they don't do this or they don't do that. And it's because they suck or they're terrible or they whatever. It's not your stepkids per se. It's a reflection of the parenting, right? It's the lack of a united expectations or, yeah, unified expectations and enforcement. A united front with your partner is critical for a peaceful home because if you guys are battling it out, obviously the kids see that. Like I've said this 100 times in this podcast, but like if you guys are on the same page, there's no way that the kids are gonna be like, okay, this is what's expected of me. Like I said, I was an adult in the situation, or am I am an adult in the situation. My stepkids are now adults though too, but I'm an adult in the situation and I'm confused at what's going on. How in the hell can I expect them with completely or not completely developed brains to figure it out as well? They're not going to. So, encouragement, grace is going to be helpful, but encouragement for sure. So, acknowledge how tough it is to have these conversations with your partner. Like, I know that this sucks to like, try to reinforce or to try to enforce or do these things, but stress how much smoother life gets when you guys are on the same page. But also with your stepkids, encourage them say when you see that they're doing something rather than thinking because I know you're going to think like oh at least they're finally doing this or it's about damn time. No, that's not what we're going to do, even though that's again what we might be thinking. We're not going to have that conversation come out of our mouth. We're also not going to have that face come off of our face. What we're going to say is, hey, you know what, thank you so much for cleaning your room today, and here's how like nitty gritty you can get on your expectations. Like if getting the rooms cleaned is a big stickler for you guys, you can say, okay, on every Tuesday, your room is cleaned, or every whatever day. You can like pick the day because they've decided like that's going to be that's going to be the day that they've picked to clean their room. They get to decide which day are you doing it. That's the day. Or which day are they cleaning their bathrooms or vacuuming the basement or, scooping the dog poop or cleaning the kill, whatever day it is, that's the day. And that alleviates an issue of like, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? But also, again, please encourage them. When you see that they are doing it, please, 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 please encourage them. Kind of like you, like if you're doing a great job, doesn't it feel good when somebody is like, hey, you're doing awesome. Like, thank you so much. I really appreciate your help. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's that feels really good for them too. And then you can also highlight the emotional rewards to your partner. Like there's less resentment. You guys have more connection. There's a lot less fighting about all of the things. And the house is a lot more calm. Everyone's on the same team. Everyone's on the same page. We understand like where we all stand, what our roles are, what's expected of us. It's so much harder. Imagine if you just went into work and they were like, do whatever you want today. You'd be like, oh, I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. Not what I was supposed to be doing. I'd probably spend a lot more time on social media than I should. I would probably call my husband and talk to him as much as I wanted to be texting my girlfriends. I would, no, it wouldn't. I thrive in structure and routines and consistency and follow through and all of those things. Kids are very much the same way. Basically, I guess I'm just like a big kid. But like having those expectations are going to be really beneficial for you guys. Everyone knows where they stand, and that actually is a really, really good thing. So if you are struggling with this, like I've talked about, like please go to aliciacrasco.com/expectations and you can grab the free resource that I have got that's called Set Up Your Step Family for Success, How to Create House Expectations That Work for Everyone. This is going to be a game changer for you. You are going to be able to get your house on the same team. Again, it's not going to happen overnight. And if you're like, you know what, I need a little bit more help with this, come join us inside the Stepmom Side community. I would love to help you through this. I host office hours every Wednesday. We've got group coaching. There's a stepmom social. There's a private chat. There's a lot of stepmoms in there that can help navigate this too. But don't do this alone. It is really, really, really hard to do. And it feels like, what's the point? Like it's a complete waste of time because you're the only one that's fighting for it. But you're okay. You're gonna be okay. Deep breaths. Follow this guide, the guide that I've got at aliciacresco.com/expectations, and you will get through this. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I will chat with you next week. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.